All right. Welcome if you're here. Looks like we've got 4 viewers so far. Feel free to say hello in the comments over to the right. Let us know you're here. Yeah, give it a little bit to get people settled in. Hi, Don. Thanks for joining. Just a few side notes. So, as we go through this workshop this morning, you're welcome to ask questions along the way. We'll probably field them for the end of the workshop. But yeah, feel free to use the comments at any time if you have questions for Justin or Andrea as we go through the presentation. Hi, Chad. Thanks for joining. All right. I don't want to delay too much, and it's 10:01, so we can go ahead and get started. So today's workshop is all about mastering lead generation ROI. This is a very important topic and also can get very complex very quickly, as every business is different and is going to lean into different metrics more than others. So I'll just say at the start of this workshop that the important thing is really to just be consistent in how you're measuring ROI, pick something and stick with that. So the goal is to really give you a toolbox to make decisions about how you're going to measure ROI, what metrics are going to be relevant to your business, and what tools are helpful in tracking ROI. So with that, we can get into the agenda. So to guide this workshop today, we have two of Top Floor's very best, Andrea Yank and Justin Curley. So thank you both for being here. We'll start off with just talking through some of the challenges of measuring ROI, some of the tools for tracking ROI, bottom line metrics, and specifically to the kind of difference between those and KPIs, which we'll get to a little bit later. Some examples, so math essentially of how to actually calculate ROI, and then we will
You're not
end
supposed to
with,
tell them that there's math. I don't want to scare them away. I want to
right,
just surprise them with it.
it's simple math. Simple math. And then we'll wrap everything up with a Q&A. So like I said earlier, feel free to ask questions along the way. Knock on wood, my internet seems to be working so far, but it was glitching a little bit before we started recording. So if anything goes wrong, I apologize in advance. Justin and Andrea will cover for me. So, all right, with that, I will hand things over to you, Justin.
Perfect. All right. Well, you're here already, so you kind of already understand the importance of tracking ROI. But again, aside from that obvious of, did this work and what am I getting from my investment, I think the why behind ROI tracking can be just as important as the metric itself. So what I've found that this typically boils down to is usually one of three things. First, there's, again, the obvious, the proved value to stakeholders. So knowing, was my marketing investment worth it? I think a lot of people in the manufacturing space haven't traditionally done a lot of digital marketing in particular, but even in some cases, marketing, usually it's maybe a couple of events, some word of mouth, some referrals, and that's kind of how they've generated business for years and years and years. So this marketing thing is relatively new. So you want to be able to say, okay, this is why we should be doing this, and this is what we're able to generate from the activity that we have. So that's very important. The other part, I think this typically falls to the more kind of, I'll call them the more seasoned marketer, maybe somebody who has a defined budget, doesn't necessarily need to prove, hey, this marketing stuff works, but does need to know where to allocate that budget strategically. So making sure that it's going to the right places, making sure that they're getting that return that they're expecting out of kind of what they've gotten historically. So allocating that budget. And then testing new strategies. So knowing historically what you've been able to get from an ROI perspective, this could be maybe you want to test a new channel. Maybe you've never done paid advertising before or Google search advertising. And you're like, all right, I know what I typically get from all these other efforts. Let's test something new and see what I get back from that. Or if you've been doing that for years and years, maybe you want to try targeting a new audience or trying some new messaging out. So being able to compare those two, this is our kind of traditional return. Here's what we're getting for this new test can be very important as well. So again, kind of understanding the why can really help you as you're tracking ROI know what to do. All right, so some challenges up front. So a number of factors can make tracking this very difficult. So what I want to do is kind of address them up front. So it's really easy to look, well, this holds me back and this stops me from doing this, and this is really challenging. It's very, very easy to kind of just throw your hands in the air and say, well, I might as well not bother. But as long as you know what these challenges are ahead of time, you can kind of plan for them, you can account for them. And what I find with data in particular, like I wish everything was as clear cut as this is the number and that means it worked or it didn't work. That's not the case. Context is always really important. So being able to understand those challenges and why maybe some numbers don't make the same sense that you think they should is important. So some internal factors, we come across this a lot, frankly, is just not tracking sales performance, or I shouldn't say not tracking it at all, but maybe just not having a clear, concise process from lead to contract received. Not having that process in place can make it really challenging to track ROI. The second one is attribution. So this is probably the biggest question in all of marketing is how do I attribute, whether it's where did this lead come from? How did we close this sale? What supported that? There's always a lot of different touch points that people have as they go through this journey. So making sure that you kind of understand and have this next point, organizational buy-in as to how you're going to be attributing leads is going to be very important as well. And then that last one, organizational buy-in, I might as well just say people. People can get in the way. There's anything from the skeptic who really just doesn't want to attribute anything to something that they don't understand. There's the kind of this is the way we've always done it type of person where, well, we would have gotten that lead anyway, so it really wasn't digital marketing that did that for us, that kind of feedback we've gotten. And then frankly, sorry if there's any of them in the room, but salespeople, they don't always want to give credit to others for the sale. And it makes sense. I mean, their job is to generate sales. So why give someone else credit for it? But I think if you can kind of align all these teams, talk about why it's important that we understand from start to finish where people come from and how we're investing our dollars, it really does help everybody in the long run. Some external factors to consider. One that's kind of on the digital only side of things are cookies or privacy regulations. As more and more privacy regulations, more and more limitations on cookies, the way that browsers handle those, it makes it really challenging to be able to track a user across multiple touch points with your website or with your social media platforms or where it's coming from. So some of that data can get lost. So just, again, knowing that that's a potential factor. You might not be able to line things up exactly with what you're seeing in Google Analytics to what you're seeing kind of in your CRM and your actual lead generation and sales tracking. Which leads me to my next point, which is just syncing that data across platforms. Again, what you see in analytics, what you see in your email platform, what you see in your ad platform, and what you might see in your CRM, sometimes there's a disconnect. Maybe you might see, I got 6 leads according to Google Analytics, but I got 8 in my CRM. Where did those extra 2 come from? It could be a cookie issue. It could be somebody submitting something twice. I mean, there's all sorts of different issues that can lead to some data, we'll call it uncleanliness because you want clean data. So the opposite would be unclean. It can lead to some issues, again, tracking across the platform. So again, being able to identify those early and how to figure out the attribution of them is going to be key up front. And then there's honestly just stuff that's just far beyond your control. There's market conditions, there's changes to customer behavior. Maybe you launch a new campaign and it's a new channel for you and you're really excited about it, but the market takes a turn for the worse. Well, is it the fault of the new marketing campaign or is it the market conditions? So again, context is always important as you are putting your marketing in place. Some additional disclaimers. I know I got a lot of stuff up front, but I just want to make sure that we talk about it so that we provide that context. So I think if you try to, I call them absolutes. If you try to make sure that your marketing data is an absolute, you're going to have a lot of sleepless nights, bags under my eyes, and a lot of gray hairs. I don't think you can see them, but they're all in my beard right now. It's really, really challenging to ascribe absolutes. So context is always valuable. So I want to provide some additional disclaimers here. So when we're talking about ROI, I think it makes the most sense to kind of think macro and not micro. And what I mean by that is kind of take a step back as far as you can to be able to calculate leads generated, the cost of it, everything that's going in it, and get kind of a high level ROI number. And then you can apply it at a micro level. I think if you just try to say, okay, I have this one campaign, I ran it for a month, here's my costs, here's the leads generated, there's just so many factors that come into it. Is it, maybe you're starting that PPC campaign, but you're sending people to a website that you haven't updated since 2015. Well, if they get to your website and they don't like what they see and they leave, is it the PPC campaign's fault or is it the website's fault? There's just so many factors. All of these marketing channels kind of blend together. So make sure that you take a step back, think macro instead of micro. And again, this is really just for providing context. The second point here, so Rand Fishkin is somebody that I followed for years and years, used to be was the founder of Moz and is now at SparkToro, but he called this marketing serendipity, where I kind of feel like traditionally you maybe consider this something like word of mouth, things that you can't necessarily invest in or you can't really tie back to a specific channel. I'll provide some specific examples here. So things like brand awareness, maybe you exhibit at a trade show and somebody sees your booth and talks to you for a bit, but they don't necessarily reach out. And then maybe a year or so down the line, they do a Google search. They see 3 unfamiliar brands and they see yours and they're like, hey, I remember that from a trade show. I'm going to click through to that. Well, from a marketing standpoint, I see that as an organic search lead. However, they really heard about you originally from that trade show. So making sure if you try to account for every single dollar that you invest immediately, I think you're kind of doing yourself a disservice into there is some value in brand awareness. There is value in first impressions and the connections that you make up front that can lead to big gains down the road. And then the last piece is that frankly, just not all marketing is designed to convert. And what I mean by convert is lead to new business. I think the most clear-cut example of this is a recruiting campaign, which we do a lot for our clients. You can definitely still track, was this successful? Did I get job applications and whatnot? But you can't necessarily tie that back to your bottom line and say, hey, this generated revenue for me because I was running this campaign. So maybe there's some customer support stuff. I know marketing gets roped into a lot of kind of either sales support or customer service report stuff. That's still time and effort. That's still resources that are allocated to it, but they don't necessarily lead to additional business that you can tie back to that bottom line. All right, let's talk about some of the tools that you need. So again, tools are going to be the key to all of this. And as you start down this ROI journey, here's some that I think are essential. So having a web analytics platform, we typically use Google Analytics 4, but there's a number of them out there. A lot of ad platforms have their own analytics, so things like Facebook ads and Google ads, Microsoft, et cetera. They're going to have a lot of data that's going to be helpful for you to track the digital marketing efforts. CRMs are great. I realize that some of them are very expensive, i.e. like Salesforce, but there's HubSpot, Microsoft Dynamics. Even if you don't have an investment in one of those tools, just to jump ahead to point number 4, even just having a spreadsheet where you're able to track, all right, here are the leads that we generated and here's the stage of the sales process that they're at, is going to be better than nothing where you're kind of just guessing, well, I know I billed for this, so that's my revenue. And again, it leads to a lot of question marks, doesn't really lead to a lot of good decision making down the road. And then finally, that accounting software. So again, QuickBooks is a really big one. I'll be kind of talking as I go through these metrics, kind of where do you pull this data from? All right, so these are the metrics that I kind of call bottom line metrics. So a lot of stuff that you maybe don't talk about on a regular basis on the marketing side, but this is kind of where me as a business owner, this is what I care about. So total leads generated, this could be something either you pull from a tracking spreadsheet or a CRM. I think if you can attribute what channel the lead came from, this is a very important step as well. The other thing I should have added one more disclaimer to these metrics is making sure that you're pulling from a large enough time frame and that you're consistent across all of these. So I typically would say 6 months to a year is a good enough time frame to kind of look back and say, okay, this is where we're pulling from, just so that you can get a better representation of, again, maybe there's some seasonality in your business. You don't want to look at 1 month that's maybe a typical down month for you. So maybe looking at that there. So total leads generated, pretty straightforward. Then there's your lead close rate, or essentially the percentage of leads generated that become customers. So again, a CRM or a tracking spreadsheet is going to be very good for you here. One thing that I do want to note, and this is kind of where that people part breaks down sometimes, is if your process is pretty manual, you're relying on salespeople to manually enter any lead that comes in into your CRM or into your tracking system. You need to stress the importance of entering all leads into that tracking system. I know historically, I know we've been guilty of it at Top Floor. Maybe a salesperson doesn't put a lead into the CRM until they're pretty sure it's going to close. Well, then you're going to think, wow, we've got an 80% close rate. But what you're missing is the 10 people they talked to that didn't lead to anything, didn't lead to a proposal, et cetera. So I think you need to make sure that you stress the importance all leads get entered into the tracking system so that we have an accurate representation of what our close rate truly is. And I think that also helps too, from a marketing standpoint. I'm a little greedy. I want that data so that I can market to them later. So maybe we didn't close anything now, but I've got their contact information and I can market to them. So there's always a benefit into adding everything, but I'm also a data hoarder. So, all right, moving forward, these are again the money metrics. Overall revenue, again, pretty straightforward. These are the dollars that you've earned from those leads that were generated. Again, you typically would get this from a CRM or a tracking spreadsheet. But what I think is truly the more impactful piece here is what we call customer lifetime value, or the average revenue that's generated by a customer for the duration of their relationship with you. I think this is really impactful, specifically in B2B, because I know it's true for us, and I know it's true for a lot of our clients. Once you start working with someone, they typically work with you for a number of years. It's very rarely a one and done project. So getting that person in, getting that new lead to convert and become a customer doesn't just have that immediate impact of that initial contract, but it's all the contracts down the road. So this, you'll likely need to talk to accounting, apologies, in order to calculate this value. I know in QuickBooks, I'm able to just kind of pull a sales by customer report for all time and be able to say, okay, I've got this many customers, this much revenue in, so therefore I've got my average lifetime value. And again, I think this is just a truer representation of ROI for B2B companies in particular. All right, now to talk about the cost side of things. So one thing that typically I think actually doesn't really get addressed a lot, and at least a lot of the other collateral I see put out there about ROI, is you got to factor in your gross margin as well, or that percentage of revenue that exceeds the cost to produce your goods. Because if you really think about ROI, you need to factor in that profitability. If it's maybe I've got an ROI of 2 to 1 when you think about revenue, so for every dollar I spend, I get $2 back in revenue. But if my gross margin is less than 50%, it's actually costing me more to get those people in than it is worth it. So factoring in that gross margin percentage is important. And then obviously the more obvious cost is those cost of marketing activities. So factor in things like ad spend, if you're working with a third-party vendor, any event costs, if you're advertising in collateral, if you have an email marketing platform, all of those costs should go into those cost of marketing activities so that you can factor in that as a piece of that ROI. All right, so this was supposed to be a surprise, Ann. Let's math. This is what I get excited about. So if math is not your thing, just tune out for the next 3 to 5 minutes, and then you can come back and we'll wrap things up with Andrea here. But I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. I like to use nice big round numbers so that it's pretty easy to look at. So let's say from the leads that we generated from marketing, we've got $1 million in immediate revenue. That's contracts in. Let's say our average customer lifetime value is around $250,000, $250,000. In this time frame, we generated 50 leads. We close them at a 40% rate, and our gross margin is also 40%. And then cost of marketing activity this looks a little weird, 120,000, but it really just comes down to we're spending $10,000 a month doing marketing. All right, so with all of those kind of assumptions in place, we can use a nice easy formula where we're taking our total revenue times that gross margin, because we want to make sure that we're looking at profit. This is what actual bottom line impact to the business. So from that $1 million in revenue with a 40% gross margin, we have a gross profit of 400,000. Let's subtract out that cost of marketing of 120,000 and divide that by that cost of marketing, or what my investment was into marketing. We get a return on investment of $2.33 per every dollar spent. Pretty decent. I think most people would take that. But if we take it a step further, and again, what I consider to be kind of a more accurate representation for B2B, if we factor in that customer lifetime value, let's say we take the leads that we generated 50 of them. we converted 40% of them into customers, or 20 new customers. And then our lifetime value for each customer is $250,000. We get lifetime revenue of $5 million. So putting that number in for our revenue into that ROI formula, we get an ROI closer to $15.67 for every dollar spent, which I think, again, anybody would take any day of the week. So factoring those things in can really have provide a new lens and provide some more kind of backing for you as a marketer to say, hey, what we're doing is working and it's having a huge impact on our business in the long run. All right. So notice that I've kind of changed the heading for this to important indicators. So a lot of times, and I know some of you are working with us currently, you'll see reports and you'll see things like sessions, you'll see things like impressions and bounce rate. And those are all indicators that we are seeing some success with our digital marketing effort. And the thought process behind it is pretty straightforward. So for website traffic in particular, if I get more people to your website, I'm likely going to generate more leads from you. Now that's true if the second metric on this list, that conversion rate, stays consistent. So if I'm able to get more people to your site and I still convert, let's say 2% of those visitors into a lead for you, obviously as traffic goes up, leads go up. But we can also focus on conversion rate. Maybe we can improve that a little bit. Let's make it a little bit easier for the people that come to our site to convert and reach out. I can keep traffic consistent and still generate more leads if I'm able to improve that conversion rate. Some other indicators you might see, again, on the SEO side of things, what we kind of look at is those keyword rankings. So when someone searches for me, where do I show up in those search results? Obviously, the lower the number, the better. It's kind of like golf. But you want to make sure that you're up near the top because you're more likely to get clicked on. Again, this isn't necessarily something that as a business owner, I'm like, great, I rank number 1 instead of number 2 now. What did it mean to my bottom line? But it does let you know that, hey, better keyword rankings lead to more traffic leads to more leads, et cetera, et cetera. And then to take it even a step further, there's impressions. So that's how often your site shows up, whether it's an ad, whether it's an organic listing. How many times does it show up in front of somebody when they do a search? So again, there's some brand awareness that's a part of that. But then there's also, if I get in front of more people, if I'm able to get more clicks, et cetera, you see where this is going. So again, these are all indicators of success. They're by no means the end all be all. I think if my team put this report in front of me and said, here's our ROI, I think I might say, okay, go back to the drawing board. But they are still very important when you're factoring in the impact of your digital marketing. So we want to make sure that we talk about those a little bit. All right. So where do we go from here? I'll turn things over to Andrea.
Right. Okay. So yes, you definitely don't want to put those indicators in front of the C-suite as like how well you're doing, right, on ROI. But if you're being asked by the C-suite, how are you improving ROI? Those are indicators that you can come back to say, well, we're working on these things, right? So I think where to start is a good place. A good place to start is benchmarking. So use your own data. It's incredibly hard to find B2B benchmarks for even the most common KPIs. So use your own data and try to improve that. But you have to know what that is, right? So you have to be collecting that. Yeah, you're just better off benchmarking your own, identifying what you want those numbers to be, and then setting goals and a time frame for those goals. Definitely combining your traffic, lead, and sales data. So I think Justin touched on this as well. Like you want to see that full holistic view of your sales funnel to identify what you want your sub goals to be. And then if you don't have a tool to do this, do it manually until you can justify implementing a tool to help you. So if you can justify the cost of your time to gather all this information, and even sales to be doing this, to those that have control over the investments that you make in the tools that you have, then that's a win, right? But you have to do it for a while. So sorry to say. Segment your channels or seasonality where it makes sense to. So you want to consider, especially with each channel, like you shouldn't expect the same traffic or conversion rate for all channels equally. Each channel really has its own place in the sales funnel. Therefore, they aren't always going to be a last touch point for each conversion. So consider that, especially how you're using those channels. Seasonality, Justin again touched on this. If you know Q4 sales are historically softer than other quarters, account for that in your goals. Maybe you have more aggressive Q1, Q2, Q3 goals and then you're pleasantly surprised when Q4 knocks it out of the park. But account for that when you're setting those goals. And then setting your expectations. So definitely start with SMART goals. So I'm sure most of you have heard this before, but specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, or relative, timely or time-bound goals. So make sure you're not just putting a number out there, but you're saying when you're going to hit that. And maybe even, again, you're breaking it out by quarter. They're realistic. You're putting actionable items behind that to make those goals happen. You're not just like throwing that number out into the atmosphere and hoping, things will change without doing anything. But yes, define those as SMART goals. And then again, defining your goals by channel or campaign. And when I talk about campaign here, I'm actually talking about how you're using your channels, whether that's awareness, mid-funnel, or bottom funnel. Your KPIs should be measuring the right things for each one of those. You're not going to measure conversion rate on awareness. You might do that on mid-funnel, but again, that's not going to be as aggressive as that bottom funnel campaign. So definitely segment that. And you could be using each channel for multiple different pieces in that sales funnel. So you may even have to segment out by channel and by campaign. So just consider that. Account for poor quality in your final quantity. So what I'm saying there is, again, we're aware that not every lead that comes to the website or even in phone calls are going to convert to that final sale or even to an opportunity to the final sale. So just account for that in your goal. So if your end goal is to improve your ROI, then you need to say, okay, I need 200 leads to come in because I know my close rate is 40%, and then I want like that end quantity is going to improve your ROI. So just account for that. And then performance goals are just as important in achieving lead goals, and that kind of brings me actually into my next slide, which is doing milestone goals, or you might call them sub goals, but they're basically specific measurable objectives that track progress and allow you to identify performance that could hinder your overall goals, or just make sure that you're on the right path. So on the flip side of that, you could be seeing like, we're on the right path. We hit Q1, we hit Q2. We're doing well. So a few different types of those milestone goals or sub goals. Quantity focused, so increasing the number of website visitors by 30% in the next quarter through SEO and PPC campaigns. Again, that could be even more specific than that. But yes, quantity is the focus of that goal. Quality focused goals, so improve lead quality by 25% by implementing a lead scoring system. Again, make that a little more actionable, but that could be your sub goal. Cost-focused goals. So lower my cost per acquisition by 20% for my PPC campaigns. Again, that is going to lead into your final ROI goal. Channel-specific goals. So increase lead conversion rate from paid advertising by 15%. That's aggressive, but that could be a goal. But again, you're making that more channel-specific, and we already talked about when to make those more channel specific. And then customer centric goals. So what we mean here is I could say increase repeat business by 20% through user experience enhancement to our online ordering system. That's thinking about if you have obviously repeat customers, how to make that easier for them and improve that experience as well. And that's really where you start, how you basically take the baby steps towards improving that final ROI goal.
All right. Thank you, guys. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. I wanted to add to what you were just talking about, Andrea, on where to start. This might be super simplistic and kind of leads to a future workshop we have, but I think starting at the bottom of the funnel when you think of the marketing funnel is also really key, because that's where you see most of those kind of bottom line metrics coming through. And you can do, like Justin was hinting at earlier, like you can do all the awareness in the world and all of that mid funnel activities. But if at the bottom of the funnel, your website isn't designed to convert, things are just going amiss there, all of that kind of becomes moot. So I think it's important to start where people are most likely going to convert, and making sure that that all looks seamless. Okay, we have a couple questions. Chad says, we all love leads. When it comes to lead follow-up by email, I think we all know personalized follow-up is best. When we want to do a mass email marketing campaign, what do we need to avoid including in the email so we do not get blacklisted by the customer's server?
Interesting. Yeah. I think in general, things to avoid is, it sounds like, you've acquired this email that you're reaching out to through the course of business. So one of the quickest ways to get blacklisted is by just purchasing huge amounts of lists of people who've never heard of you before. That comes down to, you're more likely to get marked as spam when those come through. They've never heard of you before, so they just want to get rid of it. And instead of hitting unsubscribe, it's much easier to just click the report as junk or mark this as spam. So that's one key piece when it comes to large email campaigns. The other piece too, personalize it as best you can. You want to avoid everyone's seen the marketing fail of the high first name. This is, this company. You want to avoid those, but a lot of marketing platforms do have that ability. And a lot of marketing platforms know that blacklisting is an issue. So they have kind of systems in place. When it comes to mail delivery, they'll stagger, maybe you're trying to send it out to 10,000 people. Well, they're not just going to bomb 10,000 emails out there. They might send it out in maybe 1,000 email batches, things of that nature. A lot of emails as well, or email platforms will allow you to kind of sync with your domain. So it's not coming from an @noreply/mailchimp.com. It's actually coming from your business. So a lot of servers are looking for that as well. As far as the content of the email, I'll be honest, I'm not as up to date on this. Maybe Andrew's got some inputs on it, but definitely you don't want to ask for credit card information. You don't want to ask for personal information right there in the content, but that's a little outdated information. Maybe Andrew's got some insights into others.
Yeah, just make your links clean. They all go to your website, hopefully. Don't hide your unsubscribe button, because that's the easiest way to get blacklisted. Is they have no choice but to mark you as spam, and then you're blacklisted for sure from that server. But yeah, that's probably the most important, is make sure you're not hiding anything that keeps them from being a quality recipient of that email.
Yeah, I think honesty and transparency. I think, and maybe you're not doing this, Chad, but just don't buy lists and mass upload them into your MailChimp or whatever. That'll get you blacklisted. Okay, a few more questions. Warren asks, do you support Zoho or other CRM platforms?
Yes, I mean, essentially we'll work with whatever platform our clients have. I mean, I think where there might be some challenges, if you're looking for it to integrate directly to your website, there might be some compatibility issues. So it's impossible for me to say for sure, Zoho is going to work with, WordPress or Drupal without knowing kind of what your kind of whole tech platform looks like. But as long as those CRM platforms have kind of basic information, was this a lead? Where did it come from? Did we convert them to a customer? Do we have an opportunity? Like, does it look at that whole sales funnel from start to finish? Then you'll be able to implement a lot of the stuff that we talked about today.
Lots of questions. Okay. Continuing with Warren here. In manufacturing, the customer acquisition is based more on a RFQ process than impulse buying. How does your ROI take this into account?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think everything is kind of a more considered purchase. No one's knee jerking a $500,000 piece of equipment. So I think that's why looking at a large enough time frame is important. So ROI as a metric, I don't think is something that you're going to want to update on a monthly basis. You're not going to want to say, okay, now we're a month in, did our ROI change? You kind of want to maybe benchmark it at the beginning of the year, go through a full year of marketing, getting new leads in, and then kind of check back again at the end of that year and update what did our ROI look like for these. So I think, again, that's where context becomes very key, because, again, if you just look at the straight numbers, you'll see maybe a lower number on the revenue scale, but you see we have 10 RFQs out at various stages of the process. So again, making sure that you are looking at not just marketing metrics, but also sales metrics. That's going to be important. But until those dollars come in, it really doesn't affect your ROI. So that's why you do need to, again, make sure that you're looking at a large enough picture. If you were just selling socks on Amazon, it would be very quick. You would know exactly how much revenue you generated. But as you're selling maybe bigger pieces of capital equipment, that buying process can take months or years.
Brittany asks, what are your recommendations for how to emphasize that these KPIs are important to show how marketing is filling the funnel, but for companies where their purchase cycle is long, it's unlikely we can quickly attribute sales back to a lead. I can appreciate leaders who are eager to see immediate results, but that's not often what happens with leads we generate, yet it's hard for us to tell that story in a way that resonates. I think it kind of relates back to that last question a little bit too.
Yeah, start tracking as soon as you can, because then you'll start to see, how many leads we get in versus how many of those turn into opportunities and how many of those close. You just need to get that data, basically. Start tracking as soon as possible. Because you might not be able to see exactly every one, but you can get those numbers.
Yeah, for the reporting that we do internally here at Top Floor, Anne can attest to this because she puts it all together. But she's looking at, yes, the leads that were generated for this period, but then that immediately feeds into a funnel conversation. Here's the leads that we talked about previously. Here's the stage that they're at. Here's maybe the opportunity for revenue. And then, there's whether you call it lead scoring or you're calling it kind of like likeliness to close, you can kind of start to figure, okay, they're at the decision-making process. And once they get to that part, we know that we win 50% of those contracts. You can kind of sales forecast a little bit out. And again, maybe be able to tie kind of phantom dollars to your efforts until they actually come in. But you can at least point to a funnel and say, hey, I'm filling the funnel. Here's what it looks like. Here's how many opportunities. Here's how many opportunity dollars that we have. And then you can maybe say, okay, do we need to have a conversation on how do we better support sales once the lead comes in? To kind of push people down that funnel and that decision-making process.
Yeah, definitely. I think that close rate is an important metric to keep an eye on for that predictive measurement, but also what can you do to improve your close rate, which I think marketing can also play a role in. So while your sales team is nurturing that opportunity, maybe marketing can come in and support with content that might be relevant to them at that time, creating any other kind of collateral or assets that might be valuable. So yeah, thinking about what you can do to improve that close rate too.
Yeah, close rate's an issue. Things like case studies, testimonials, those are the types of things that marketing can kind of pull in and start to provide to sales, so that once we know that they're at this stage, we can put some things in front of them that are going to help kind of sway them in one way or another.
And this is, I think, too, is where communication is really critical between marketing and sales, and making sure those aren't siloed teams, because sales is important in giving that feedback to marketing, right? I need a case study that really emphasizes this key piece of what we do. This would really resonate. So just making sure there's that feedback loop in place, for sure. I have a couple of things I want to share. The first one is an ROI ebook that we put together that you are welcome to download, and it'll just help you kind of walk through this process on your own. How to kind of organize your e-commerce team, establish goals around ROI. It kind of delves into this topic a little bit deeper, and sort of like a workbook where you can follow along and do it yourself. So feel free to download that if you think it would be helpful. And then a couple of other things. We have 2 upcoming events. One is a workshop in September, which is Map Your Success, a buyer persona and user journey workshop for manufacturers, and really touching on that kind of bottom of the funnel piece. I think if something you're struggling with is conversion rate on your website, or you're just wondering how you can kind of make that final push for those customers are interested, but for whatever reason are not making that final commitment, that can be a great workshop for you to just kind of understand how users are navigating through your website, and what you can do to, again, lead them to that sort of quote unquote final touch point. And then in October, we have our manufacturing roundtable. So for those of you who have been to these before, this one is kind of our, I guess, end of year wrap up, if you will. So it'll just be covering the state of manufacturing in 2024. We are sponsoring the Wisconsin Manufacturing Report. So we will have the CEO from the WCMP there as our keynote. There'll be a panel discussion with manufacturing leaders. So it should be a really great event, just kind of covering some of the largest things that have been really impacting Wisconsin manufacturers in the year 2024 and what to look for ahead.
Yeah, and we talked
So
about
yeah,
how difficult it is to benchmark. And again, this isn't necessarily digital marketing specific. It's kind of more the state of overall manufacturing, but you're hearing from hundreds of manufacturers what it's like for them, the challenges they're facing. So if I can, again, continue to shamelessly plug that event, it's really cool to see kind of where people are at. It can also be kind of vindicating to know that you're not alone in these challenges and that other people are seeing the same things. And then it can help you figure out as a marketer, where do we go from here? How do I take this information, put it into effect, and help grow my business?
yeah, definitely. I just posted a couple links to those events if you'd like to sign up for them. I think that is all I have. Anything else, Justin and Andrea? I feel like we've covered a lot, but yeah, thanks for all the questions, everyone. And thanks, Justin and Andrea.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye.